We're running a little late. We're going to go ahead and start. I know you're super excited to hear this panel, or maybe just too tired to get up and leave. But all the air conditioning is off outside this room, so you have to stay here. That's not true. Some of you believe it. You're staying. OK, good. Very good. My name is Richard Soley. I've talked to some of you before, yesterday and today, and some more tomorrow. I'm sorry, I'll stop soon, I promise. Our panel today, if you've looked at the description, says something about small countries. We chose Kazakhstan, Brazil, and Chile, 3 of the largest countries in the world. Wasn't that clever? Yes, thank you. They're not exactly small countries. Really, the focus of the panel is more building IoT centers of excellence in emerging economies. So how many of you know about the economies of Brazil or Kazakhstan or Chile? Oh, a few of you, OK. I counted about 10 hands in a room of about 1,000. So we're all going to learn something. Hopefully, I'm going to learn something, most importantly. We have 3 specialists in IoT Centers of Excellence in their countries, some with some special news to talk about, exactly in the last day. To my right, that's pretty good, right? Showing my left hand and saying right. To my right, first, Sanzhar Kettebekov. I did it this time. Yep. That's right. From Kazakhstan, Almaty Tech Garden. Yep. Is going to talk about IoT Centers of Excellence in the emerging economy of Kazakhstan. And then Hahn from Brazil is going to talk about, big surprise, Brazil. He comes from Santa Catarina. I understand that's the most beautiful part of Brazil.
It is, definitely.
Yeah, OK. At least for the next 43 minutes and 23 seconds. And all the way to the right, Aldo Boitano is from Chile, is going to talk about Centers of Excellence and IoT adoption in Chile. So we're going to do this panel in a very simple way. Each of them is going to give you some story for about 5 or 10 minutes at most, and talk about the Centers of Excellence and establishing innovation in an emerging economy, because these economies are much bigger than you think. Not only are the countries bigger, the economies are bigger. And then we're going to go directly into questions. And I warn you, if you don't have questions, I do. So thank you. We'll start with Sanzhar.
Right. Hello, everyone. The presentation.
Yeah, I did.
So a few words. I represent a National Innovation Development Fund of Kazakhstan, which pretty much collects 1% from oil and gas and mining revenue and redirects it into innovation projects. It's pretty similar to what Innovation Norway does anyway. So we manage special economic zone. It's 160 square kilometers. We have a series of investment programs, and we co-fund various centers of technological development. One of them is related to IoT, and of course we picked the industry that very relevant to us and relevant to core economies. It's mining. Oil and gas also, they're of interest, but mining is the very traditional Kazakhstani industry. And it goes back to the before World War II type of timeline. So one of our partners, and we built our centers of excellence based on industry partnerships. So those are, it's kind of a Cambridge company called IntelliSense. So they're doing lots of work across the world, including Chile, Kazakhstan, and all over the place, basically South Africa. So as an innovation development fund, we're tasked on pretty much digitizing or digitally transforming part of the industry. And as related to IoT, we looking at, those are the goals. It's 10 to 20% productivity improvement. That's the major goal. But also, most important in such a conservative industry, it's a transparency. So that's why IoT is the proper instrument to enforce that transparency and attract investment as a result. Of course, cost reductions are critical. You know, the fluctuating commodities and mining companies I wouldn't say some of them, I would say majority of them operate at 5% margin. So it's quite a deal breaker to have something optimized. And of course, moving into, since it's a conservative industry, moving into more something adaptive, agile models, and definitely into service models. And as you know, mining companies, they tend to do it themselves, all of it, from supply chain, transportation, IT, and etc. And that's the typical mistake that happens. So we in the process of digitizing those plants, but to give you a bigger picture, why we're doing that. The core competency, as I mentioned, Kazakhstan has pretty much within top 5 for all the mineral positions, copper, aluminum, etc., and lots of rare earth metals. So one of the strategic direction Kazakhstan picked is pretty much producing high added value in producing metal powders for 3D printing. We understand that it's industry is just gearing up, but it takes a while to turn around the mining sector to put the new standards of quality, costs, and etc. So what we're doing is pretty much trying to rebuild all that chain, starting from geology, materials, mining, and all the way to additive manufacturing, which, you know, most of the standards come from actually ready parts, not from the metal powders. So Industry 4.0, it's exactly the instrument to enforce those standards, material quality, and etc. So as an instrument we use, it's, as I mentioned, 1% of oil and gas and mining companies' revenue we redirect onto innovative projects. We also co-fund centers of competency, and one of them is IoT Center of Competency. And of course, there are various government grants that's used. And I'm going to skip a few things, but just to show you an example, what it looks like, it's basically optimization as the service. You know, to push innovation into conservative industry, you don't come up just with the digital transformation. It's too ambiguous for a mining company. That's why you need to translate it to their terms. So optimization as a service. So you're trying to optimize the industry. So this is pretty much monitoring and optimization center that has a trained staff and looks at various predictive models and optimizing quite a few things like grinding, pipeline, thickening circuit optimizations. These are pure mining things. There are, to provide enough technology, and what we've noticed that general IoT in mining today, and it's more of a sensor capability issue, IoT can cover only 50% of the process. The rest of 50, there's no sensors that can digitize the actual processing. So there's a huge opportunity in actually creating new sensors. And that's why we, part of what we do is a national startup program. This is the same, we're actually motivated by Chilean program, Startup Chile, and we have Startup Kazakhstan, where we're focused on those core industries. There are 2 stages. We fund up to 100K, and international acceleration program. And those are a couple of examples of companies we see today. It's related to financial services because those direct feeds from mining, they end up in stock exchange. As well as hardcore, say, network and data delivery. It's a LoRaWAN specifications. We have startup, for example, that assembles the base station. The cost of it is $600 and the radius is 15 kilometers. That's enough for open pit operations. Underground mining is a different story, but again, it's a startup solution that solves a huge problem. So things like this, innovation is you see is the same. It's just the way to present it and the way to push it into conservative industry is quite different. Thank you.
Thank you. Rizzo, that brings us to you. I think you have some news from your government as well.
We do. Actually, it's exciting times to be in Brazil if you are involved with industrial internet or IoT. Very quickly, I think the best word that defines myself is entrepreneur. I started a company that's now 21 years old in Brazil called Pollux. And in the latest years, I put together an executive team that freed up a little of my time to do other things. That's when I joined IAC. It's been 2.5 years now. And by seeing what's happening there, we realized that we needed something similar in Brazil at the local level. And we started the Industrial Internet Brazilian Association. The first members joined in January, and now we are about 40 members. And we're getting a lot of traction. And we also have established the liaison with IAC to make sure that we are really connecting in a much more global stage for industrial internet. So the theme in Brazil is not new. We've been discussing that a lot in the past 2 or 3 years. There is no week in Brazil without 4 or 5 major events about Industry 4.0 or industrial internet. And I think at this moment, what we see, we're moving from the discussion to action. And that's where I really like to be. I think this is the best moment for industrial internet companies to really think hard about being in Brazil. And why should we be in Brazil? If you take any of the predictions from the major consulting companies, they all say that in a not very far future, Brazil will be one of the top 5 economies in the world, along with China, US, India, and Indonesia. So the opportunity is not there. It's really on the way to get there. A lot of things are being built in Brazil right now. So we have a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built. We have a lot of solutions that need to be provided. And I think what makes a lot of sense in this movement as we get there is the transformation that the country will have. And IoT and industrial internet, in our mind, it's really important to the moment that the country is living. And we see that in a lot of actions. Not only we have the Industrial Internet Brazilian Association, we also have the IoT Brazilian Association. And as I mentioned to you before we came on stage, yesterday, the Brazilian government, the federal government, through the Ministry of Science, Technology, Innovation, and Communication, it's a long name, they just launched the action plan for IoT in Brazil, which is a formal way to really get things started. And that's involving all the ecosystem, including the centers of excellence. So Brazil traditionally has a lot of those centers connect to the major universities like USP, Unicamp. But one project that I would like to mention that I think it's quite important at this moment is being done by Senai, which is a group of technical schools in Brazil. It's one of the largest education institutions in the world. And through a partnership with Fraunhofer Institute, in the past 3 or 4 years, they launched 20 institutes of innovation in Brazil. And each one of them is focused on one of the technologies. So you have IoT, embedded system, advanced manufacturing, additive So there's a lot of things happening. So if you come to Brazil, I think 2018 will be really a landmark on how things are going to start moving much faster.
Thank you, Rizzo. And last but not least, Aldo, to talk about the smallest of the 3 countries, Chile, only 5,000 kilometers north to south. It's tiny.
Tiny country, yes. Well, thank you for this invitation. I will say Chile is a combination of being isolated for a long time or geographically isolated, and at the same time stressed with the situation of catastrophes in one end, and then a lot of natural resources. So we, like your country, we are devoted to mining and devoted to agriculture and trying to create an ecosystem of collaboration that will allow us to move past the first stage. There's a lot of initiatives like Startup Chile and incubators based on universities. And even Dr. Soley organized a year and a half ago a big gathering of IoT experts around the planet to portray international connections and also portray Chileans who are trying to do things there. But we lack, it could be an opportunity or it could be also seen as a threat. We lack a funding system to go into stage number 2 and 3. So people will come to Europe or go to the US, typically the West Coast, and trying to sell their products, call it DNA encryption for luggage, micro-seismic ways of assessing underground resources and mineral resources, earthquake warning systems, and things that we take for granted because of where we live, but it's not so easy to go again to fund those things. A lot of, like I said, a lot of people end up leaving or working somewhere else. It's a big opportunity, as the title of this panel said, to leapfrog and to move to be an advanced country, and we really need it. We have a lot of environmental issues. We're a fragmented country. That was the idea of a foundation you put together a couple of years ago. And we really need to either the world come to us or we come to the world, or at least collaborate on what we're doing at the present time. Most of the initiatives are private or university related. The government is setting up or trying to set up solutions linked to lithium products, base products, and also some nanotechnology linked to copper, but not so much IoT solutions in the mining sector. Again, you're working with our government, Dr. Soley is doing it, on trying to create a common language so we could learn from the large international companies that are there, BHP, Rio Tinto, and others, and also Codelco, who's Chilean, and try to improve the way we do things in the whole copper industry, who's our main industry. That doesn't mean people are not smart or bright and they're talented and they like restaurants. They come and pop and with ideas, but then they go to bankruptcy or they don't move to the next stage because they don't have a visibility. Our stock market is not so risk taker, and there's no much way of financing, as you were saying in Brazil, financing those ideas. That's seeing the glass less full. The good thing is those people strive with those solutions and find ways of marketing them or patent them and go move forward. Agriculture too. We have one of the countries have the most free treaty agreements in the planet because we don't pose a threat to anyone. So China, the US, Europe signed with us. We were a test bed for treaties. And that helped us because those treaties have strict rules that we have to comply environmental issues and things, and we have to produce organic wines or organic produce and take care of the environment. So it's a mix. My take being here is to invite you to connect with a lot of people who are doing a lot of great things, and hopefully we will learn and also take some of the things just this Congress has to the well-being for our country.
Well, speaking of learning, actually, and while I ask this question, you should think of some questions, because otherwise I promise I'm going to ask my own. But while you're speaking of learning, I mean, somehow each of your countries is trying to do something to capture the lessons learned from implementing IoT in real systems or in the startup programs. How do you keep that knowledge, ensure that you're keeping that knowledge for other people, you're keeping it in the country so that you have people able to use that knowledge to build new companies, new opportunities, and new inventions?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have a friend here who works in the mining industry in Chile, and the knowledge is between people from 70 to 85 years old, and they're still working. And nobody, and probably you smile because that's the same in some production, and it's hard for younger people come and they don't know how to operate things, and they're asked to do things in a different way, more automatic and so on. I think that's a key question. It's how we
Well, really the question is there an organized approach? Because the topic here is centers of excellence. How do we, and the center of excellence is really about capturing knowledge so it doesn't have to be reinvented. I mean, is that something that, for example, Rizzo, that the Internet Association is trying to do?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's one of the objectives of the association, but also Brazil has a tradition of a lot of liaisons with universities in the US, for instance, MIT. We also have a long-term relationship with Germany, like the Fraunhofer Institute. So those kind of connections always happen. I just think that we need to accelerate them. And I think that IIC is one of the good things that we put together. And I think it's clear that in Brazil we don't want to start from zero. I think we can leapfrog a lot of the things. We have a client that he has never used a robot in the past, and now he's using a mobile robot, which was launched the last year. So you don't have to go through the whole process, and you can really jump ahead. And I think that's one of the concerns that we have, is how can we move faster, by really learning from what has been done, what are the problems that other countries had, and move from there.
And that's something I think I saw on your slides, Sanzhar, as well, is capturing knowledge so that you can reuse it. And that is the essence of a center of excellence.
Definitely, that's the model of center of excellence or center of competency if it's focused on more of a market, like internally focused. Of course, the knowledge is held by the companies that actually work there. So what we're trying to do is create a partnership, which usually involves a university, maybe a joint university programs with one of the international universities, such as Penn State University, for example, in mining and the other areas. And definitely the local company, that's one of the most advanced in there. It's a series of technological partners to bring new technologies, and one or two strategic partners that involved in that's a global perspective or business transformation perspective, which is necessary for overall sector. Of course, it's very tricky how to balance those interests between different partners, which have different kind of roles and interests, but that's the key to success of establishing such an omnidirectional kind of centers for omnidirectional functionality. In that case, that creates a critical mass, and all the necessary elements is in one place.
But how does your country? We'll go back to Aldo. How does your country know? How do people in your country know that there is this center of excellence and they can learn something from it? How do you disperse that information to make sure that it becomes part of
the mining sector, who's led lots of our efforts, there's something called the proveedores de clase mundial, or world-class providers, where they basically, all the companies, even though they're competing, they open up a problem, and then the solution is open to everyone. And then also the group or the organization who develops the solution owns the solution, funded by the companies who are trying to. And the agricultural is also doing, in the agricultural world, it's happening something similar, not at the scale of all the producers, but avocado producers, wine producers. They're also coming up with solutions that are, they're moving from competition to co-opetition, like cooperating and competition, and that way at least the knowledge is created and shared, and we're coming to a more virtuous circle. In those worlds only, I would say.
So this is starting to work. I mean, as you probably know, that country, southern hemisphere country of 17 million people, is half of the fruit and vegetable of the northern hemisphere during the northern winter. Half, which is pretty amazing. But I didn't know if there's an office somewhere where you get that knowledge, the agricultural knowledge, also the application of IoT to those large agricultural, watering and providing nutrients to the soil and so forth. Yeah, where do I go if I want that information? That's part of the question.
Yeah, they're moving from test of soil and then take it to a lab to full-time 24-hour soil assessment, and then changing cultives with the climate change, dealing with the sensors that will turn water or tell heaters on, or will tell. That's happening right now. There's a lot of technology and solutions because we're stressed by the environment.
So Rizzo, is that something I find in Brazil as well? I mean, I know you like to talk about robots, but it's not all about robots.
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, the study that was done this year by McKinsey, they were hired by the Brazilian government to set some of the priorities for the countries and end up with 4 sectors. Agriculture is one of them, smart cities, health, and manufacturing. And as an association, we are really looking to all the 4 of them. And last week in Rio, we just approved the 8 ideas for test beds, and 2 of them are in the agricultural business. So the next step for us is we're going to go talk to Embrapa, which is one of the most successful agencies in Brazil, and they are behind of all the success in development we had in the past 3 or 4 decades that made Brazil really a powerhouse in terms of agriculture and also animal protein production. So they do have the knowledge about what's going on, but they may not be aware of what IoT can do. So what we're going to do as an association, we're going to approach them to learn, what are some of the problems they have that IoT could help them solve, and start those test beds early next year.
So I have to ask you, I know that Astana was originally Akmola, but in between, it was supposed to be the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, right? Silinograd.
Yes.
I know the strangest things, I know. Can you talk about agriculture as well in Kazakhstan, or you really just want to talk about mining?
Well, we haven't gotten, as a fund, we haven't gotten to agriculture.
Okay.
Agriculture is a big story, though. It's, I think, the largest opportunity regionally because of all this land available. But it goes back to the culture of the industry. When, for mining, it's very critical to stay afloat. Their best interest to evolve. So you don't have to push them. Besides, there is present of all the instruments, they basically have to spend 1% of their total revenue onto R&D. And then if you don't, as the company, you can lose the mining license. So it's a good motivation to move forward. So, and that's why government took an extra step of creating those national centers of excellence in various industries. So we're doing mining, manufacturing, doing materials, financial sector, and etc. So you need an extra kick.
Is that
Usually.
is that the big differentiator, do you think, in supporting innovation in an emerging economy? I mean, you've mentioned it a couple times now, or at least it seems to be for Kazakhstan. Is it something that might work in Brazil and Chile as well?
I think so.
No.
In enforcing a percentage?
Well, what I heard from the Brazilian government is that within the action plan there will be finance that is devoted to innovation, but that's nothing new. I mean, we have the Brazilian Development Bank. They always have those credit lines that are only valuable for innovation. So what I see is, I think the way that it's being created in Brazil is not very different from what you have, maybe in Europe or even in North America. It's just at a smaller scale because of the size of the economy. But I think the methodology is the same, and I think the innovation. The only thing I think, Richard, that we lack in Brazil, and I studied in the US, I saw how it happened there. I think somehow we haven't been able to really connect the universe to the industry or to business. It's still far away from what I see in Germany or even in the US. I think this is one of the problems that we have in Brazil. And if I were to guess where it's coming from, because there is always the 2 sides, I think the universities in Brazil, they tend to be very conservative, very protective of what they do in the universe. And they don't turn that knowledge into business innovation that will become a product or a service or a solution. So that's something that we actually need to improve in Brazil, for sure.
So I could go on all day, and I will if someone asks a question. We have about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to take some questions from the audience. And there is a microphone somewhere I just can't see. So there are microphones in the back. Any questions? There's a question over there.
Yes, hello. My name is Tony Harris from the Argentina IoT Marketplace. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Tony.
I'm interested in the panelists from Brazil and Chile particularly, to know if you have any difficulties or concerns with the regulatory environment concerning the use of frequencies, because we do in Argentina. Thank you.
Yeah.
Frequencies for IoT,
You mean
like
radio
LoRa, yes,
radio
spectrum
spectrum.
use,
Yeah.
like Sigfox LoRa, for example.
I would be interested in that
Yeah.
answer from Kazakhstan too, but please go ahead. Aldo, do you want?
Yeah, we were just talking with a friend here yesterday that you need to get a frequency and how the law has been changed. On a different time in my life, I used to run the largest ski resort there, and one day in the middle of the ski season, they were shutting us down because we hadn't paid $20 per the license fee for using some used to be free frequency and now charge frequency, and nobody sent us the bill or anything, and they wanted to shut us down. It's an ongoing thing, especially with the geography too. And we had a panel, remember, in Santiago, we're trying to track the whales, and somebody says, I have satellites. Somebody said, I don't have satellites. I will put sensors and collect them on the ocean a year later. It's an ongoing thing because a lot of the IoT solutions means connectivity. And
Did I understand you right? You're trying to track whales in Santiago?
no.
You do
We
know,
talked about tracking whales in Santiago.
you do know it's the only inland part of Chile,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Do you want to try that?
Yeah,
Rizzo?
I guess in Brazil, we are here early this week. On Monday, there was a meeting between the Brazilian mission and the Catalonian people here. And I was in the audience, and we had one of the major telecom companies in Brazil, Oi, and after that, we had the people from Sigfox. So it seems to me that the arrangement that's being created should suffice. What I think it's really important is that different from other instances in the past, that Brazil, which is a very isolated country, if you think about the size of the economy in Brazil and the trade that you do, it's pretty much isolated. And some of this, the fact that we isolate also created some local standard that nobody else is used. So when I travel with my cell phone, I have a hard time to plug because our plug is unique in the world. So one of the things the association is trying to do is we've been studying some of the standards and the proposed standards, such as the reference architecture. We have analyzed it and translated, and we're giving that to the Brazilian government. And the concern that we have is that we create an infrastructure not only on the frequency, but also on the standards that is equal to most of the people are doing the rest of the world, so we don't get isolated. But from the understanding of what I saw on Monday, it seems that we should not have a problem as far as the frequency. They're shuffling things around, and we should be, covering. We just have a new satellite that is in test now, but apparently everything is working fine. So that will give us a lot of coverage also in the forest, in the center part of the country. So as a combination of the private telecom companies plus Sigfox plus satellites, I think the problem in Brazil is not going to be very big. We'll be able to manage that. I'm more concerned that we also adopt the same standards as the other countries for interoperability of the solutions.
So Antonio is in the same part of the world as Brazil and Chile, but I'm interested, Sanzhar, in whether you can give an answer. Like, as have the other two panelists, you spent a lot of time in the United States, and you've seen the difference in spectrum management in the States and Kazakhstan. I wonder if you can talk about that as well.
Well, it's pretty much the same as United States, I would say. The difference is LoRaWAN still flies under the radar for like FCC type of analogy agency. Although since recently there's been quite a bit of interest, but in the context of smart city standards and safety standards. So those are probably going to be the driving for as pertaining to IoT, and then probably LoRaWAN SLA type of requirements and things for particular applications that may, like it's basically more of a product liability question. In mining, it's slightly different. You're somewhere in the boonies, and I mean, you don't disturb anyone and anything. So
you can do whatever you want.
Pretty much. Well,
You can use X-rays.
in situ leaching, for example, it's one of those things. But city regulation is probably going to be the driver, or standards for smart city is going to be the one that affects the IoT framework.
That was a good question, Antonio. We have another one, not over here. Any other question over here? Is that someone walking over to the microphone again? No, he gave up. Okay. I'm sorry, it's really hard to see out to you. Well, hopefully you can't see us either. So I guess what I'm trying to get at how innovation is most different in your economies than it is in, say, in Spain, anywhere in Europe or North America. What is the difference that you see? I mean, we've talked a little bit about funding model. We've talked a little bit about the dysfunction between the connections between university and large companies and companies in general. What else makes it better or worse? Is there something that you can address?
No, I can say that for me, one of the things that we also need to make it easier in Brazil is to take innovation to the market that's normally taken through startups, new companies, or entrepreneurs. And as you may heard about, the bureaucracy in Brazil is still very complex for starting a business and for handling a business. So I think that's another obstacle that we are aware of that, and there is a lot of pressure to change that for better. And some of this, when it's city law, some cities like Joinville, Porto Alegre, and São Paulo, they're making it much, much easier for you to start a business. And instead of having to prove a lot of things to get the business started, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You can start, and we'll go on a check, and that's on our time. So I think that's one of the important things. We also just passed a reform on the labor law because it was very hard for small companies to hire employees because it's very expensive and creates a lot of liabilities if you hired someone. So the law is now not ideal. I think it's still far from ideal, but it's much better. So I think that's one of the things. As you make it easier for entrepreneurs to take the idea of, even if you are like a student at a university and you're learning something and you want to create a project, you have to start a business. So I think the missing part that we have now is really to make it easy for the startup to succeed and have the seed money and the venture capital fund for them, which in Brazil is a little bit scarce compared to especially the US.
So Aldo, I mean, that's some of what I see in Chile as well. Difficulty to find funding, difficulty to start companies. The complexity is you feel the same way, or is there some kind of innovation another opportunity for innovation in Chile that you don't see elsewhere?
I think we have opportunity because again of the way the country is shaped and the difficulties. If it works there, it should work somewhere else. We have a good path into innovation. It's just a matter of the cultural aspects of it. Younger people seems to be more collaborative, seems to be more open, more easy to share, don't see the others as competitors, where normally older people tend to have a mentality of the scarcity versus a mentality of abundance, and then they put all that bureaucracy into the project and takes time. So I'm afraid that people will develop things and go elsewhere instead of trying them there, because that's what will happen. They'll might as well get on a plane, meet investors, come to a congress like this instead of doing it there. But it's flowing. It's flowing.
Is bureaucracy in the way in Kazakhstan as well?
Well, I wouldn't say bureaucracy is the main showstopper. I would basically add two things to what my colleagues just described. One is even you have startups, when you're dealing with the innovation and the conservative industries, there is a huge gap between the industry and entrepreneurs, startups. So to reach that last mile, you really need to hold startups' hand to do that. Because the, say, mining industry, they would require a certain SLA level. They don't want to risk like $10 million per day operations and etc. So all those requirements are very stringent for a startup. So that's why placing them in some kind of test bed, we use the term model factory. It's basically some limited test environment that like financial markets do as like a sandbox, and let them play there. And of course, bringing an industrial platform like IBM Bluemix or Watson IoT allows to bridge that gap for industry requirements. This is first one. The second one is, I guess, ability and how venture capital works other than in the United States. I think it's true for any country, including EU. And there is not enough exits, so there's not enough corporate demand from venture capital. So that's the one of the largest probably challenges we facing, how to attract this private capital. And I mean, attracting is a part of the story. Show where the exit is going to be. That's the one of the toughest ones.
Well, that's how you attract it, right? I mean, so you said you talked about capital a couple times. Are you talking about FDI, foreign direct investment, or are you talking about capital from Kazakh companies?
Well, it's both. It's capital from Kazakh companies. This is government co-funding venture funds or labs, for example, right? So in the developing economies, you need something that gives additional motivation for investors to invest, or additional security that they have some sort of exit. So that's what the part of the challenge we have. In fact, that's a challenge in the country was basically motivated the country to have its new Astana International Financial Center, which works on the basically kind of English common law, and have a 50-year tax-free special economic zone that pretty much attracts that innovation. Attracts the fundings that can be used for innovation. So you need special conditions in the country to pull that extra capital.
So here in the audience, we have about 1,200 people, and there are big investors over there and over there and over there. So you've talked about what the biggest challenges are, and we heard some of what are the biggest opportunities. We only have a couple minutes left, so what are the opportunities that they should be thinking about?
I think of a smart city. I see it, how it develops elsewhere, and I see in this Congress and elsewhere how it's working and how we are not even close of discussing how we're going to get there, and how big players, small players, medium players going there. We're setting up a lot of solar energy plants in northern Chile, but we're talking about smart grids and things like that. So a combination of energy and smart city planning or IoT solutions implementation, it's something I think the country needs it and be very welcome to receive.
Yeah, I guess in Brazil you can pick it. Big agriculture, big manufacturing, oil and gas, mining, 200 million people connect to the internet. I think independent of what you do for the next 10 years, Brazil will be growing a lot, and there will be opportunities for all.
How many of those 200 million people are connected to the internet?
65%.
Yeah. just checking.
So there's opportunity to connect the other 35.
The opportunities
right?
to connect the other 70 million people, yes.
That's
Okay,
right.
okay. Honesty is the best policy, Rizzo.
Well, for Kazakhstan, of course, we see largest opportunity for IoT is mining. In fact, we had the roadshow and talking to different startups, and when they tell me that, well, that's expected check they're gonna get from the City of London, I tell them that you can get that 1 month from the mining company, that's worth like 2 years of what you get paid in the city. So the cost structure is quite different opportunity-wise for IoT. But I think largest opportunities, if we think a little bit more on a global perspective, is how to properly connect those conservative sectors like mining to directly and streamline all that data to financial markets. So connecting to stock exchange in real time, for example, then you have a full supply chain of management and etc. And Silk Road, I think, is one of the largest opportunities. So it's logistics, but it's pretty much driving all the supply chain in quite a regional scale. And of course, it's all connected to financial services, providing the new types of financial services. It's blockchain, it's IoT-enabled environment where you track everything.
And that's where I go if I want to see the best IoT Center of Excellence in Kazakhstan? In Almaty?
Well, Almaty is probably the better one.
And where do I go in Brazil? We only have a few seconds left. Where's the best IoT Center of Excellence?
I think it's in São Paulo.
It's in São Paulo.
And Florianópolis.
That's not where you live. I just wanted to remind
not
you.
for that.
Okay.
São
And,
Paulo and Florianópolis.
I will say UFRO in the southern Chile is the best one. Universidad Frontera, La Frontera is the best innovation center.
Okay. Thank you very much. That takes us to the end. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Yes, thank you.